I am sitting here in front of my screen watching the most consequential event in transatlantic history unfold in real time. Not on CNN, not in the New York Times, not on Capitol Hill, right here, right now. And there is a clock running 72 hours. That is the deadline NATO has given the United States of America to withdraw its forces from every alliance installation on European soil, or face formal expulsion from the organization it helped build 77 years ago. The alliance that won the Cold War, the alliance that guaranteed peace for 3 generations, the alliance that defined what the West even means. It is not fraying anymore. It is finished. And the countdown to prove otherwise expires in 11 hours. Subscribe to Daily Brief right now and hit the notification bell, because I will be going live at 3 a.m. Eastern to cover the moment the deadline hits in real time. You do not want to be asleep for this. Let me walk you through the 14 days that broke the Atlantic Alliance, because this did not happen overnight. This was a cascade of decisions, each one worse than the last, that turned America's oldest partners into adversaries, and every single step is documented. Day 1, January 15th, 2026, President Trump sends a formal diplomatic note to the government of Denmark. The message is simple and brutal: sell Greenland within 10 days or face 100% tariffs on all Danish exports to the United States. But here's what nobody reported. The offer included zero compensation, zero. Instead, Trump proposed canceling what he called Denmark's, quote, defense debt to the United States. A debt, for the record, that does not exist in any legal framework. Not one treaty, not one statute, not one line of international law. Denmark is not just a country. Denmark is a NATO ally. Article 5, mutual defense. The same article that was invoked after September 11th, the same article that sent Danish soldiers to Afghanistan to die alongside Americans. And Trump told them to hand over an autonomous territory or get taxed into submission. That was day 1. Day 4, January 18th. The insult heard around the world. During a Fox Business interview, Trump claims that NATO allies, and I am quoting directly, stayed a little back, a little off the front lines during the war in Afghanistan, while American troops did the real fighting. That statement landed like a grenade in London, in Berlin, in Ottawa, in Warsaw, because every single one of those governments buried soldiers in that war. Soldiers who died on the same mountains, in the same valleys, in the same firefights as Americans. But the statement is not the worst part. That same day, Trump orders a 40% cut to the American military budget allocated for Ramstein Air Base in Germany, the largest U.S. military installation outside of American territory. 120 U.S. personnel are given 30 days to withdraw. No consultation with Berlin, no warning to NATO command, just an executive order signed in the afternoon and transmitted before dinner. That is not an ally. That is an occupier giving notice. Day 7, January 21st. This is where it gets dangerous. The Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs circulates a classified memorandum to all 27 European Union member states. The subject line reads, Activation of Article 42.7. That is the Mutual Defense Clause of the Treaty of Lisbon. It carries the same collective defense guarantee as NATO's Article 5, except it does not require American participation. Poland is formally proposing that Europe prepare to defend itself without the United States. For the first time since 1949, a European democracy is circulating documents that treat American protection as a liability rather than an asset. Let that sink in. Poland, the country that most depends on American deterrence against Russia, Poland is the one drafting the exit plan. Day 10, January 24th, the quiet betrayal. Prime Minister Keir Starmer meets privately with French President Emmanuel Macron at Chequers. What happens in that room does not stay secret. The Guardian publishes a leaked transcript within 48 hours. Starmer makes an offer that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. If the United States moves forward with expelling Denmark from NATO over Greenland, the United Kingdom will withdraw from the Five Eyes intelligence sharing agreement. That is the surveillance and intelligence alliance between the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand that has existed since the end of World War II. In exchange, Britain commits to joining what Macron is calling the European Intelligence Union, sharing classified signals intelligence with Brussels instead of with Langley. The CIA is losing its most important partner because of a real estate dispute over an island. Day 14, January 28th, 10 p.m., Brussels time. The emergency session of the North Atlantic Council convenes. 30 member states are represented, 29 delegations are present in the chamber. The United States is not invited. What happens over the next 4 hours will be studied in law schools and war colleges for the next 100 years. According to the official minutes transmitted to a source at NATO headquarters in Brussels, 28 nations vote in favor of a resolution titled Suspension of United States Voting Rights Pending Compliance Review. Only 2 nations vote against, Turkey and Hungary. The legal basis is Article 13 of the North Atlantic Treaty, a provision that has never been invoked in 77 years of alliance history. The formal charge against the United States is this: President Trump's public threat of military force against Denmark, a treaty ally, constitutes a material breach of Article 1's foundational commitment to settling international disputes by peaceful means. It is the first time a founding member of NATO has been charged with violating the treaty's core principles. At 3:14 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte places a phone call to the Pentagon. The message is direct. You have 72 hours to withdraw American forces from all NATO installations on European soil or face formal expulsion from the alliance. This is not a negotiation. This is notification. Now! You might be thinking, they cannot actually do this. The United States has nuclear weapons. We have 100,000 troops in Europe. We have the world's largest economy. No one would dare expel us. Wrong. I am going to show you exactly how they plan to do it, because this is not theoretical. This is a 4-stage process that is already in motion. This is how you evict a superpower. Stage 1, legal pretext, already complete. The European legal team at NATO headquarters has built a case they believe is airtight. Document 1, Trump's public threat to use military force against Greenland violates Article 1's commitment to peaceful dispute resolution. Document 2, the unilateral 40% budget cut at Ramstein Air Base violates Article 3's requirement that member states consult on matters affecting collective defense. As reported by Just Security earlier this year, legal scholars have argued that a U.S. attempt to seize Greenland militarily would constitute an attack on Denmark, which under Article 5 would be an attack on every NATO member simultaneously. The legal foundation is set. Stage 1 is complete. Stage 2, diplomatic isolation. This is happening right now. Today, the Munich Security Conference, the most important annual gathering of transatlantic defense ministers, convenes. For the first time since 1963, the United States is not invited to the core sessions. On February 3rd, EU defense ministers hold a closed-door session in Brussels. The agenda includes one item, post-NATO security architecture. On February 5th, a trilateral summit between the United Kingdom, France, and Germany takes place. The topic listed is the European nuclear umbrella. That phrase is critical. It means Europe is actively discussing how to replace the American nuclear guarantee that has protected the continent since 1949. You are not at the table anymore. You are on the menu. Stage 3, economic strangulation. And this is where every American watching this needs to pay close attention. The European Union has prepared a sanctions package they are calling Operation Independence. It has been drafted. It has been reviewed by legal counsel. It is ready to deploy the moment the 72-hour deadline expires. Here is what that package contains. 100% tariffs on all American technology exports to the European Union. Semiconductors, software, cloud computing, everything. A prohibition on European banks extending credit to American corporations operating within EU jurisdiction. And the nuclear option, freezing $2.3 trillion in American assets held within the European financial system. If the EU activates this package, the dollar does not weaken. It collapses. American inflation spikes to levels not seen since the Weimar Republic. We are not talking about a recession. We are talking about economic collapse on a scale not witnessed since 1929. And this one would be entirely self-inflicted. Stage 3 is locked and loaded. Stage 4, military expulsion. And this is the scenario that keeps Pentagon officials awake at night. Under Article 13, a suspended member state loses the legal protections that come with alliance membership. American military installations on European soil would no longer be protected by treaty. Host nations would have the legal right to reclaim sovereignty over those bases. According to a document leaked from the German Ministry of Defense 2 days ago, the operation is already named. Operation Charlemagne. Germany will nationalize Ramstein Air Base. 35,000 American service members will be given 90 days to vacate. Turkey will close Incirlik Air Base, which currently houses American nuclear weapons. Poland will seize $4 billion in NATO prepositioned equipment stockpiles located on Polish soil. This is not a bluff. European military police units have been quietly repositioned near American installations over the past 2 weeks. If the deadline expires without compliance, the eviction begins immediately. Now pause. I need to tell you what no one else is connecting right now, because losing the bases is not the real story. Losing the alliance is not the real story. The real story is what happens the day after America is expelled from NATO, because Beijing has been watching every single one of these 14 days, and they are calculating. The United States currently maintains what military strategists call a two-theater force. We are prepared to fight simultaneously in Europe and in Asia. That capability depends on forward-deployed forces in both regions. But if NATO collapses, if we lose access to European bases, we face an impossible choice. Europe or Asia. We cannot do both. Here is the math the Pentagon is running right now. If America is expelled from NATO, 60% of the U.S. Navy currently stationed in the Atlantic and Mediterranean will have to redeploy to the Pacific to maintain credible deterrence against China. That redeployment takes months, and during those months, the United States will be strategically exposed in both theaters simultaneously. According to a study produced by the RAND Corporation and commissioned by the Department of Defense, if NATO collapses, the United States will not have sufficient naval and air assets to defend Taiwan from a Chinese military operation. The report estimates that China's window to act would move from 2030 to 2027, 3 years earlier than every previous assessment. And there is more. The European Union-India trade agreement signed 6 days ago includes a clause that almost no one has analyzed. Article 12 states that signatories remain neutral in conflicts not directly affecting European territory. Read that again. Neutral. That means if China moves on Taiwan and the United States calls on allies for support, the European Union will decline. They will cite neutrality. Japan and South Korea, whose security architectures depend on the American umbrella, will panic. And Beijing knows that the collapse of NATO creates a window of 6 to 8 months where America is paralyzed, unable to protect Europe, unable to fully commit to Asia, and unable to rely on partners who have decided that neutrality is safer than solidarity. But here is the move that no one saw coming. Right now, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Turkey host approximately 150 American tactical nuclear weapons on their soil under a NATO arrangement called nuclear sharing. If the United States is expelled, those warheads have to leave European soil immediately. But Europe would not have its own deterrent. Only France and the United Kingdom possess independent nuclear arsenals, and Britain just signaled its loyalty is shifting east toward Brussels. According to a memo leaked from the Élysée Palace dated January 26th, President Macron has proposed a French nuclear umbrella for all EU member states. But the condition is stark. Germany, Italy, and others must fund 100% of France's nuclear weapons program going forward. The cost is estimated at 120 billion euros annually. Germany's response, delivered through back channels, was a flat refusal. Chancellor Scholz called it fiscal blackmail. And that refusal creates a vacuum, a security gap. And there is only one country on the planet both willing and positioned to exploit that gap. Russia. American expelled. NATO dissolved. European nuclear umbrella refused. Eastern Europe panicking. And Moscow, which has been waiting for precisely this moment, begins probing Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Without American forces, without Article 5, without a credible deterrent, those 3 nations are exposed. This is not speculation. This is the war game scenario NATO has been running in classified sessions for the past 6 months. And the results of those simulations are not reassuring. Now, the White House knows all of this. They have run the numbers. They have seen the projections. And their response may be the most terrifying part of this entire crisis, because the president has 3 options on the table right now, and every single one ends in catastrophe. Option 1, preemptive withdrawal. What sources inside Mar-a-Lago are calling the screw you strategy. According to a source with direct access to the president's inner circle, Trump is seriously considering withdrawing the United States from NATO before he can be expelled. The logic, as twisted as it sounds, is narrative control. He announces that America is leaving because Europe refuses to pay its fair share. He frames it as strength, not as defeat. The executive order is already drafted. It is sitting on his desk. He could sign it tonight. But if he does, the U.S. stock market collapses 40% within 72 hours. The dollar loses half its value as global capital flees American assets. Inflation spikes to levels this country has never seen in peacetime. We are talking about an economic catastrophe worse than 2008, worse than 1929, and it would be entirely voluntary. Option 2, economic warfare, the sanctions reversal. An internal Treasury Department memorandum dated January 27th outlines a retaliatory package that would impose 200% tariffs on all EU goods entering the United States, freeze $800 billion in European assets held in American banks, and attempt to cut Europe off from the SWIFT financial transaction system, of which the United States controls roughly 40%. The goal is to make Europe hurt badly enough that they beg for reconciliation, but there is a fatal flaw. It only works if America has allies willing to join the sanctions regime. China, India, and ASEAN nations have all signed trade agreements with the European Union in the past 2 weeks. They are not siding with Washington. They are siding with Brussels, which means if Trump launches this economic war, the United States ends up sanctioning itself. American exporters lose access to the world's largest consumer market. European trade simply redirects to Asia. And the American economy implodes while the rest of the world moves on without us. Option 3. Military standoff, the Fortress Europe scenario. This is the option that genuinely concerns me. Multiple sources inside the Pentagon report that Trump is considering instructing the 100,000 American troops currently stationed in Europe not to withdraw. Instead, he would declare U.S. military bases on European soil to be sovereign American territory, and any attempt to seize them would constitute an act of war. This is being seriously discussed, and Europe's contingency plan in response has already been circulated among EU defense ministers. If American forces refuse to leave, Germany and Poland will immediately surround U.S. bases with their own military units. They will cut off electricity, water, food supplies. They will turn American service members into hostages, not to start a shooting war, but to create a humanitarian crisis that forces Washington to back down. But here is the nightmare scenario. What if one nervous soldier on either side fires a single shot? What if a confrontation at the perimeter of Ramstein escalates into an exchange of fire? At that point, you have American troops and European troops shooting at each other. Two democratic alliances at war. NATO would not just collapse, it would end in bloodshed. Which option will Trump choose? I spoke to a former National Security Council official 1 hour ago. Someone with direct knowledge of the conversations happening inside the White House right now, and what they told me should concern every American regardless of politics. Trump does not believe any of this is real. He thinks Europe is bluffing. He thinks when the deadline hits, Brussels will blink. They will extend negotiations. They will back down, because in his mind, no one would actually dare to expel the United States. But I have read the documentation. I have spoken to officials in 3 European capitals, and I am telling you they are not bluffing. This vote was 28-2. They have spent 6 months preparing for this exact moment. They have war-gamed every contingency. They have built the financial, diplomatic, and military infrastructure to function without America. This is not emotional. This is strategic. And there is one final element that changes everything. The Joint Chiefs of Staff sent a classified memorandum to President Trump at 9 p.m. last night. The message was blunt. Do not retaliate. The military leadership of the United States is telling its commander-in-chief that economic retaliation would collapse the American economy, that military confrontation would trigger a NATO civil war, and that preemptive withdrawal would destroy American credibility for a generation. And according to a source inside the Pentagon, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Mark Milley personally called Mark Rutte in Brussels 2 days ago. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. Milley's message was simple. Give us 90 days. We will handle Trump internally. The implication is clear. The American military is considering the 25th Amendment. 4 members of the cabinet have already held private discussions about declaring the president unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. The threshold question is whether a military order against European allies constitutes incapacity. There is no precedent. But the conversations are happening right now. Let me bring this full circle. 14 days ago, this crisis began with an insult about Afghanistan. It escalated with extortion demands over Greenland. It accelerated through unauthorized budget cuts and unilateral threats. And tonight, 11 hours before the deadline, we are staring at the simultaneous collapse of the Atlantic Alliance, the potential removal of an American president, and a global power vacuum that China, Russia, and the authoritarian international are prepared to fill without hesitation. The world you wake up to tomorrow morning will be fundamentally different from the one you went to sleep in last night. So I want to ask you directly, does the United States remain in NATO at any cost? Or is Europe justified in expelling a president who threatens military force against a treaty ally? Or is the real answer that both sides have failed, and what we are watching is not just the end of an alliance, but the end of the Western world as the 20th century built it? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Here's what you need to do right now. Subscribe to Daily Brief immediately, because in 11 hours, everything could change, and we will be the first with the breakdown. Hit the notification bell. I am going live at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to cover the deadline in real time. Send this video to someone who still thinks NATO is fine. They need to see what is actually happening. The Atlantic is burning. The question is whether America burns with it, or whether somebody in that White House, in that cabinet, in those classified memos, finds a way back from the edge before the clock runs out. I will see you at 3.